on, young lady, and act like an adult. You racist!
I've been sexualized.
We understand in this world that the easiest thing for really stupid people like Angel Reese to do is to claim racism.
I think there's a lot of racism when it comes to it.
I told myself it's not racist for me to like Caitlin Clark's game and to say so publicly.
Black people are supposed to be better than white people at basketball. That's crap. Angel Reese's team sucks. Angel Reese can't make a basket.
Her fan base has gone, I'm talking about
it's a lot.
No one expected this to explode this fast. Just hours ago, Angel Reese found herself at the center of a massive storm after comments about Caitlin Clark suddenly ignited one of the most intense backlashes the WNBA has seen all season. What started as another moment in the long-running rivalry between two of the league's most talked-about players quickly turned into something much bigger, something far more damaging. Because the reaction wasn't just criticism, it was a full-scale eruption. Fans flooded social media, comment sections exploded, clips began circulating across every sports platform within minutes, and the same supporters who once defended Reese at every turn were suddenly asking a question nobody expected to hear this early in her career. Did Angel Reese just push the Caitlin Clark rivalry too far? The controversy began when Reese appeared to take a shot that many fans interpreted as directed straight at Clark and the massive wave of attention surrounding her. Within minutes, the internet went into overdrive. Some viewers believed Reese was simply speaking her mind in the middle of a competitive rivalry. Others saw something very different, a player letting frustrations spill into public attacks. But what shocked people the most wasn't just the comment itself. It was the speed of the fallout. Major sports accounts picked up the story instantly. Analysts began debating the situation on live broadcasts, and suddenly, a moment that may have started as competitive trash talk was turning into a headline dominating the entire basketball world. And the deeper you look into what happened next, the more complicated this situation becomes. Before the backlash exploded across social media, the tension between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark had already been building for years. It didn't start in the WNBA. It started in college basketball, when the two players became the center of one of the most talked about rivalries the sport had seen in decades. When Reese led LSU to the national championship and celebrated with the now famous "You can't see me" gesture toward Clark, the moment instantly went viral. Some fans loved the confidence, others saw it as disrespectful, but one thing was undeniable: the rivalry between the two players had officially become one of the biggest storylines in women's basketball. From that moment forward, every matchup between Reese and Clark felt bigger than a normal game. Crowds grew louder, media attention intensified. Every reaction, every celebration, every stare during games was captured by cameras and dissected online. The WNBA quickly realized what it had: two young stars, two completely different personalities, and a rivalry that could drive headlines and viewership every time they stepped onto the same court. But the attention came with pressure. Caitlin Clark's arrival in the WNBA created a massive surge in popularity for the league. Attendance numbers skyrocketed, television ratings jumped dramatically, fever games became some of the most watched events in the entire league. For many fans, Clark represented the new face of the WNBA, and that sudden spotlight created complicated emotions around the league. Some players openly welcomed the new attention, others quietly questioned whether the coverage surrounding Clark overshadowed the talent that had already been in the league for years. Angel Reese often found herself right in the middle of that conversation. She had built her own massive following long before entering the WNBA. Personality, confidence, and willingness to embrace the spotlight helped turn her into one of the most recognizable athletes in women's sports. But the constant comparisons between Reese and Clark never stopped. Every game turned into another debate. Who was the bigger star? Who had the greater impact? Who truly represented the future of the league? Fans argued endlessly across social media. Some supported Reese's intensity and unapologetic confidence. Others rallied behind Clark's record-breaking performances and calm demeanor on the court. The rivalry grew bigger than either player. It became a symbol of the WNBA's new era, one defined by passion, personalities, and massive public attention. But rivalries in sports are delicate. When the competition stays on the court, it fuels excitement and pushes players to perform at their highest level. When the tension spills into personal comments or social media exchanges, the narrative can quickly shift, and that's exactly what seemed to happen this week. because the moment that triggered the latest controversy didn't happen during a game-winning shot or a heated playoff matchup. It happened during a comment that many fans believed crossed an invisible line. Suddenly, the rivalry wasn't just about competition anymore. It was about perception, respect, and whether the growing tension between two of the WNBA's biggest stars had finally reached a breaking point. And once that moment went public, the backlash began almost instantly. The moment that ignited the backlash didn't happen during a heated playoff game, it didn't happen during a hard foul, and it didn't happen during one of those dramatic late-game showdowns between rivals. Instead, it started with a comment, a short moment that many people initially thought would pass like any other piece of sports talk. But within minutes, the reaction online proved this situation was different. Because when Angel Reese appeared to take a swipe that fans believed was aimed directly at Caitlin Clark, the internet reacted instantly. Clips began circulating across sports pages. Screenshots of the comments spread through fan communities, and the interpretation from many viewers was immediate. Reese had just escalated one of the biggest rivalries in basketball. For some fans, the reaction was frustration. They argued that Reese had once again allowed the Clark rivalry to become the center of attention instead of letting her performance on the court do the talking. Others rushed to defend her. They pointed out that competitive athletes talk trash all the time. Rivalries are part of sports, and players should be allowed to express themselves without every comment turning into a controversy. But the discussion didn't stay balanced for long, because as the clip continued spreading, a wave of criticism started building faster than anyone expected. Large sports accounts reposted the moment. Comment sections exploded with thousands of reactions, and within hours, the narrative surrounding Reese shifted dramatically. Suddenly, the debate wasn't just about a rivalry, it became about respect. Analysts began asking whether Reese had crossed an invisible line by appearing to target Clark during a time when the league was experiencing unprecedented growth. Many fans pointed out that Clark's arrival had brought massive attention to the WNBA, sold-out arenas, record television ratings, and huge sponsorship deals. To them, Reese's comment felt like an unnecessary attack on a player who had helped elevate the league's visibility. Others rejected that idea completely. They argued that the WNBA is full of talented stars who deserve recognition. Not just one player dominating every headline, but the most surprising twist came next, because the backlash didn't just come from fans. Several former players and commentators began weighing in publicly. Some criticized Reese's approach, saying rivalries should stay competitive but respectful. Others suggested the media itself had created the tension by constantly framing the Reese dynamic as a personal feud rather than a basketball competition. The debate quickly spread beyond sports. It began touching on deeper conversations about media narratives, fan culture, and the intense spotlight surrounding women's basketball's new generation of stars. But while everyone argued online, one reality became impossible to ignore. Angel Reese had suddenly become the center of the storm. Every new post, every reaction, every headline kept pulling the focus back to her. And that's when the first shocking twist appeared. Instead of slowing down, the backlash actually intensified. Some fans began digging up past interviews, old clips, and previous moments from the rivalry, trying to connect them to the current controversy. Entire video compilations appeared online, analyzing every interaction between Reese and Clark from the past 2 years. The story was no longer just about one comment, it had become a full investigation into the history of their rivalry. And the more attention it received, the bigger the controversy grew. Because now the conversation wasn't just about what Reese said, it was about what people believed it meant. And in today's social media environment, perception can spread faster than facts, which meant the situation was about to escalate even further. Because when the next reaction came from inside the basketball world itself, the entire narrative shifted again. What happened next is what turned a heated online debate into a full-blown WNBA firestorm. Because once the clip started circulating everywhere, the reaction didn't stay limited to fans arguing in comment sections. It reached the players. And when other voices from inside the basketball world begin reacting publicly, that's when a situation like this can spiral out of control. At first, it started quietly. A few analysts mentioned the situation on sports talk shows. Some suggested the rivalry between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark had reached a dangerous level of media obsession. Others argued the entire conversation had been blown out of proportion. But then former players began speaking up, and their reactions were far less cautious. One analyst criticized the constant tension surrounding Reese, suggesting that the WNBA's biggest stars should focus on elevating the league, rather than fueling unnecessary rivalries. Another commentator went even further. They argued that the attention surrounding the Reese-Clark rivalry had become so toxic that it was starting to divide the fan base itself. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't just about two players anymore, it was about the entire culture surrounding the league. And as those discussions intensified, the pressure surrounding Angel Reese continued growing, because every new reaction pulled her name back into the center of the story. Sports media outlets began releasing segments analyzing the controversy. Panel discussions debated whether Reese's comments had crossed a line. Some hosts defended her competitive personality, pointing out that basketball has always thrived on rivalries and emotional intensity. But others questioned whether Reese was allowing frustration to damage her public image during one of the most important moments in the league's growth. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark did something that only made the situation more complicated. She stayed quiet. No public response, no social media posts addressing the controversy, no interviews attacking Reese. Clark simply continued focusing on her games, letting her performances speak for themselves. And for many fans, that silence spoke louder than anything else. Because while Reese's name continued trending across sports media, Clark's highlights were dominating basketball broadcasts. Big plays. Record-breaking performances, sold-out arenas. The contrast between the two narratives became impossible for fans to ignore. One storyline was about controversy, the other was about performance, and that contrast created the second major twist in the entire drama. The backlash toward Reese began growing even stronger, because the longer Clark remained silent and focused on basketball, the more critics began framing Reese as the player fueling unnecessary drama. Social media turned, brutal memes began circulating, comparing Reese's comments with Clark's on-court success. Comment sections filled with fans arguing over which player was truly elevating the league. Some supporters defended Reese passionately, insisting she was being unfairly targeted by critics who were eager to turn her into a villain. But others believed the situation was becoming a public relations disaster, and the media coverage only amplified that perception. Headlines started appearing questioning whether Reese had damaged her reputation with fans. Debates erupted about whether rivalries should stay on the court instead of spilling into off-court commentary, and through it all, the rivalry that once helped drive excitement around women's basketball was starting to look less like competition and more like controversy. The situation had reached a point where every new development felt like it could push the story even further. Because when sports narratives reach this level of attention, they rarely fade quietly, they escalate, and the next wave of reactions was about to prove just how explosive this controversy had become. Because when the fans themselves fully entered the conversation, the fallout became impossible to ignore. By the time the story had spread across every major sports page, the reaction from fans had reached a boiling point. This wasn't just another sports debate anymore. It had become a full-scale internet battle. Every social media platform looked the same. Comment sections were flooded with arguments about Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, and the rivalry that now seemed to divide the entire WNBA fanbase. Supporters of Reese pushed back hard. They argued that she was being unfairly criticized simply for showing emotion and confidence. To them, Reese represented the same competitive energy that has always existed in basketball. Trash talk, rivalries, and personality have been part of the sport for decades. But critics saw something completely different. They believed Reese had crossed a line by repeatedly fueling tension around Clark instead of letting the rivalry stay on the court. Many fans pointed out that the WNBA was experiencing one of the biggest growth moments in its history, and they felt the constant drama surrounding the rivalry was becoming a distraction. The reactions became more intense. With every passing hour. Video edits began circulating across social media, showing past moments between Reese and Clark. Old clips from college matchups resurfaced, previous interviews were dissected, fans began analyzing every comment, every stare, every celebration the two players had shared over the years. The rivalry was being rewritten in real time. For some viewers, the story confirmed their belief that Reese had embraced the role of the league's villain. For others, it felt like the media and internet were unfairly turning a competitive athlete into the center of unnecessary controversy. Meanwhile, the attention surrounding Caitlin Clark only continued growing. Highlights from her recent performances flooded sports broadcasts. Her games continued drawing massive audiences. Analysts praised her ability to remain focused despite the constant noise surrounding the rivalry, and that contrast only intensified the debate, because while Clark's name appeared next to highlights and record-breaking performances, Reese's name was dominating headlines about controversy. For many fans, the difference was impossible to ignore. Some supporters of Reese tried to shift the narrative, reminding people that the WNBA is full of talented players who deserve recognition beyond a single superstar. They argued that the league's future shouldn't revolve around just one storyline, but critics responded that the issue wasn't about attention, it was about perception. And right now, the perception surrounding Reese was becoming increasingly negative. Sports talk shows began discussing whether the controversy might affect her reputation with sponsors or influence how the league markets its biggest stars moving forward. The conversation had moved far beyond basketball. It had become a discussion about image, influence, and the enormous pressure placed on athletes who suddenly find themselves at the center of the sports world. Angel Reese had entered the league as one of its most confident and outspoken personalities. That confidence had helped build her brand and attract millions of supporters. But now, that same spotlight felt heavier than ever. Because in the middle of one of the most intense fan reactions the WNBA had seen in years, Reese was facing a moment that could shape how the basketball world views her for a long time. And as the noise continued growing louder, one final twist was about to push the entire controversy to an even higher level. Just when it seemed like the backlash had already reached its peak, something unexpected happened that pushed the entire controversy into an even bigger spotlight. Because while the internet continued arguing about Angel Reese's comments, a new development suddenly shifted the conversation again, and it came from the one person everyone had been watching: Caitlin Clark. For days, Clark had remained completely silent. No interviews addressing the drama, no social media posts responding to the backlash, nothing. While Reese's name was trending across sports media, Clark continued doing exactly what she had been doing all season: playing basketball. But then during a post-game interview after one of the Fever's latest games, a reporter finally asked the question everyone had been waiting for. They asked Clark directly about the growing controversy surrounding her rivalry with Angel Reese. The room went quiet. Fans watching the clip later said you could almost feel the tension before Clark answered, and when she finally spoke, her response surprised a lot of people. Instead of firing back or criticizing Reese, Clark kept her answer calm and simple. She said rivalries are part of sports. She said competition pushes players to get better. And most importantly, she said her focus was always going to remain on basketball. That was it. No insults, no drama. Just a short answer before moving on to the next question. But the impact of that moment was immediate. The interview clip began spreading across social media almost as fast as the original controversy. Many fans praised Clark for refusing to escalate the situation. Analysts pointed out that her response helped shift the conversation away from personal conflict and back toward the game itself. But for Angel Reese, the effect was complicated because Clark's calm response created a stark contrast to the intense backlash Reese had already been facing. Suddenly, the narrative around the rivalry looked very different. One player appeared focused on letting her performances speak. The other remained at the center of a controversy that continued dominating headlines. Sports commentators began asking whether this moment would permanently change how the rivalry was viewed moving forward. Would the league continue promoting the Reese Clark storyline the same way? Would fans eventually move past the controversy and return their attention to the games themselves? Or had this moment permanently altered how the basketball world sees the rivalry between two of the WNBA's biggest stars? The truth is, nobody knows yet. Because sports history is full of moments like this. Moments where controversy either fades away over time or becomes a defining chapter in a player's career. Right now, Angel Reese stands at the center of that exact moment, and what happens next could determine whether this backlash becomes a temporary storm or a turning point that changes the entire trajectory of her story in the WNBA. Now the conversation shifts to you, because moments like this always split the sports world right down the middle. Some fans believe Angel Reese is simply being unfairly targeted, They argue that rivalries are part of basketball and that confident players are often criticized more harshly than others. To them, Reese is just playing the game, with the same competitive fire that has always existed in sports. But other fans see the situation very differently. They believe the constant controversy surrounding the Reese-Clark rivalry is starting to overshadow the basketball itself. They argue that when the focus shifts from performances on the court to comments off the court, it can damage how players are perceived by fans and media alike. So now we want to hear your honest opinion. Did Angel Reese go too far with her comments about Caitlin Clark? Or is the backlash against her being blown completely out of proportion? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now and join the conversation. And if you want more breaking stories about the WNBA, the biggest rivalries in basketball, and the drama shaping the future of the league, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because this Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark story is far from over. And the next chapter could be even bigger.